What if the single decision you make before the sun rises could determine the kind of person you become for the rest of your life? What if the hour you choose to wake up is quietly shaping your mindset, your discipline, your greatness, and you didn't even realize it? What if 4 a.m. isn't just a time, it's a mirror that reveals who you are when no one is watching, a mirror that exposes your excuses, your habits, your fears, and your potential all at once? Because here's the truth: the world at 4 a.m. is honest. It strips away noise, distractions, comparison, and pressure. And when everything is silent, the only thing left to confront is yourself. You see, most people never wake up early because they think the challenge is physical. They think it's about losing sleep or forcing discipline. But waking up at 4 a.m. isn't about the body. It's about the agreement you make with your own identity. When you rise before the world rises, you create a psychological advantage. You tell your mind, I lead, I don't follow. You tell your habits, I choose my life intentionally. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice, one you forgot about, starts whispering, maybe I can become more. At 4 a.m., your day doesn't own you. You own it. You set direction before the world pulls you in 100 places. You set your emotional tone before life throws its chaos at you. You set your focus before distractions attack your intention. That early hour becomes a mental headquarters, a quiet command center where the most important decisions of your life are made with clarity instead of haste. And let me tell you something important: waking up early isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about showing up for your own life before anyone else demands a piece of you. It's about proving to yourself that your future matters enough to fight for. It's about building a relationship with discipline so strong that even on the days you don't feel motivated, you still move forward. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are becoming. And here's where everything begins. The moment you choose to get up at 4 a.m., you are no longer negotiating with your comfort. You are negotiating with your future. And your future is waiting for you in the quiet, long before the world awakens. There's a powerful truth most people never understand. The moment your alarm rings at 4 a.m., you are standing at the crossroads between who you were yesterday and who you could be tomorrow. And the decision you make in those first 3 seconds determines far more than you think. Because those seconds are not about waking up. They're about identity. They're about declaring through action the kind of person you believe yourself to be. Most people hit snooze not because they're tired, but because they're negotiating with their limitations. They're giving comfort a louder voice than purpose. They're choosing the familiar over the future. When you wake up at 4 a.m., you interrupt that pattern. You break the loop. You disrupt the old story you've been telling yourself for years. I'll start later. I'll try tomorrow. I'm not ready yet. That early hour becomes the battlefield where the old version of you fights desperately to stay alive. And the new version, the one you've always wanted to become, finally has space to grow. Not because it's easy, but because discipline requires discomfort. And discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. And here's what most people miss: waking up at 4 a.m. gives you time no one else controls. It's the one part of the day untouched by demands, notifications, obligations, or expectations. It's the one moment when the world is silent enough for you to actually hear your own ambition, to hear the goals you buried beneath business, to hear the dreams you pushed aside because life got noisy. In those quiet hours, you reconnect with the intentions you forgot you had. But more importantly, waking up at 4 a.m. teaches you something extraordinary about yourself. It teaches you that you can do difficult things consistently. You can follow through when no one is clapping for you. You can honor your commitments without external validation. And when you realize that, something shifts inside you. You begin to trust yourself more deeply. You begin to believe that your actions align with your words. You begin to understand that discipline is not punishment, it's self-respect. So ask yourself what would happen if, for the next 30 days, you chose to rise before the sun. What would happen if, instead of reacting to life, you began shaping it with intention? What would happen if you gave yourself those quiet hours to build, reflect, plan, and grow? You already know the answer. Your life would change because you would change. The world has convinced you that success is about speed, that it's about doing more, achieving more, proving more. But waking up at 4 a.m. teaches a different kind of lesson, one the world rarely talks about. It's the lesson of stillness. The kind of stillness that allows you to think clearly, to breathe fully, to understand what actually matters. Because when you wake before the noise, you discover something powerful. Success isn't built in chaos. It's built in calm. It's built in the invisible hours when no one sees you working, when no one is measuring you, when no one is expecting anything from you. In the quiet of 4 a.m., you finally have room to hear the thoughts you've been drowning with distraction. You have space to process the emotions you've been ignoring. You have the opportunity to ask yourself questions. Most people never stop long enough to ask you. What do I truly want? What am I afraid of? What is the life I'm actually trying to build? These questions don't show up in the middle of a busy afternoon. They show up when everything is silent. And answering them requires courage. But that early hour also reveals something else: clarity. Clarity is the foundation of change. When you start your day before the rest of the world, you can identify the behaviors holding you back. You can see the habits that no longer serve you. You can notice the patterns you've been repeating without realizing. And once you can see them, you can change them. That's the power of waking up early. It gives you the vantage point to rise above your own life and look at it from a higher place. And if you've ever wondered why highly disciplined people wake up before sunrise, here's the truth. They're not trying to impress anyone. They wake up early because they understand the advantage. They understand that self-discipline creates freedom. They understand that the quiet hours give them a head start, not just in productivity, but in mindset. They begin each day with intention instead of reaction. They create momentum instead of waiting for it. They train their mind to follow their decisions rather than their feelings. So if you choose to wake at 4 a.m., you're not just changing your schedule, you're changing your self-perception. You're telling yourself every morning that your future is worth showing up early for, that your goals matter enough to sacrifice comfort, and that the person you want to become is meeting in the silence before sunrise. There's a moment that happens when you start waking up at 4 a.m., a moment most people never experience because they never push themselves far enough to reach it. It's the moment when you stop seeing early mornings as a burden and start seeing them as an advantage. At first, it's uncomfortable. Your body protests, your mind resists, your excuses grow loud. But after a while, something shifts. You begin to notice that waking up early gives you a sense of control you didn't know you were missing. It gives you ownership over your day. It gives you a level of confidence that comes not from what you achieve, but from the discipline it takes to simply show up. And that's when you start to understand that waking up early isn't actually about time. It's about identity. It's about becoming someone who follows through, someone who honors their commitments, someone who can rely on themselves even when the task is difficult. Because the truth is, anyone can wake up early once. Anyone can force themselves out of bed with a burst of motivation. But consistency, that's the real milestone. When you wake up early again and again, even on the days you don't feel like it, you build a kind of inner strength that can't be developed any other way. And here's what makes this powerful. Consistency in one area spills into every other part of your life. If you can win the battle against your pillow in the dark hours of the morning, you begin to win other battles. Procrastination, doubt, fear, hesitation. You begin to trust your own discipline. You begin to believe that if you set a standard for yourself, you will meet it. That belief is transformative. It changes the way you work, the way you speak, the way you pursue your goals. It changes the way you walk into challenges because you already know you can do something difficult before the day even begins. And perhaps the most surprising part is this: waking up at 4 a.m. increases your gratitude. When you're awake while the world sleeps, you notice things you normally miss: the stillness, the sky before sunrise, the quiet that feels almost sacred. You feel connected to your own life in a deeper way. You feel present. You feel grounded. And in that space, you begin to realize how many opportunities each day actually gives you, opportunities you used to rush past without noticing. So waking up early isn't just a habit, it's a declaration. It's you choosing to live deliberately, not by accident. It's you stepping into the driver's seat of your own life. There's a truth about waking up at 4 a.m. that no one tells you. The transformation doesn't happen in the moment you open your eyes. It happens in the moments afterward. The choices you make, the thoughts you feed, the intention you bring into the silence of the morning. Because waking up early is not the victory. The victory is what you do with the time you've earned. And this is where most people fail. They think the power is in the hour, but the power is in the purpose. If you wake up early without direction, you're just tired. But if you wake up with clarity, that hour becomes the most valuable part of your entire day. The early morning gives you something rare, an environment where your mind is untouched by distraction. No messages, no expectations, no demands pulling you in a dozen directions. Your brain is at its purest state, calm, focused, open. And when you use that moment to invest in yourself, reading, learning, journaling, planning, reflecting, you activate a different part of your identity. You step into the role of someone who leads their life, not someone who reacts to it. You become someone who invests in their growth before the world even knows you're awake. And here's why this matters. Most people live their lives on autopilot. They wake up and immediately get swept into routine, into noise, into survival mode. From the moment their feet hit the ground, they're rushing, they're coping, they're responding. But when you get up at 4 a.m., you create a buffer between your life and the world's chaos. You give yourself room to think, really think about where you're going and why. You start your day in alignment instead of confusion. You build momentum before anything has the chance to disrupt it. The truth is, the most successful people aren't the smartest. They're the most intentional. They know that clarity creates consistency, and consistency creates results. So when you rise early and direct your energy towards something meaningful, your vision, your goals, your growth, you begin shaping your life with precision. You build a foundation of purpose that supports everything you do afterward. And the best part, this habit compounds. One intentional hour becomes one intentional day. One intentional day becomes a week becomes a month becomes a life built not on chance, but on deliberate action repeated over and over again. That is how waking up early changes you, not instantly, but inevitably. There comes a point in your journey of waking up at 4 a.m. when you begin to notice something subtle but powerful. Your relationship with time changes. Most people feel like they're constantly running, constantly catching up, constantly overwhelmed because their day owns them. But when you rise before the world, you begin to experience time differently. Not as something that pressures you, but as something you command. That early hour slows the world down. It stretches your morning. It creates room to breathe, to think, to prepare. And suddenly you realize that you were never actually short on time, you were short on intention. When you start your day early, you stop living in reaction mode. Instead of waking up already behind, already stressed, already scrambling, you begin your morning with space. And that space creates strength. It gives you the ability to approach your responsibilities with clarity instead of chaos. It gives you the ability to respond thoughtfully instead of emotionally. It gives you the ability to move with purpose instead of panic. That is the quiet power of waking up early. It restores ownership over the hours you used to lose without even noticing. But this shift doesn't just affect your morning. It transforms your entire day. When you wake up early and begin with intention, you carry that mindset with you into every interaction. You communicate differently. You think strategically. You handle challenges with more patience. You make decisions with more confidence. You don't feel like you're being pulled by your day anymore. You feel like you're leading it. And when you feel in control of your day, you feel in control of your life. And here's the surprising part: waking up at 4 a.m. doesn't just give you more time. It gives you better time. Your mind is sharper. Your creativity is higher. Your emotional resilience is stronger. When the world is quiet, your ideas are louder. When there is no pressure, your potential rises to the surface. You begin tapping into a level of clarity that feels almost impossible to reach once the day becomes noisy. That early hour becomes sacred, not because of the time itself, but because of who you become in that silence. And eventually, you'll start to notice something profound. The person you are at 4 a.m. is the person you've been trying to become for years. Focused, disciplined, intentional, present. That person has been inside you all along, waiting for the world to quiet down long enough for you to meet them. And once you meet them, you'll never want to go back. There's a moment in everyone's life when they realize that their future won't change until they do. And for many people, that realization happens in the silence of an early morning. Because waking up at 4 a.m. forces you to confront a truth you've avoided for years. The life you want requires a different version of you. Not a slightly improved version, not a more motivated version, a stronger, more intentional, more disciplined version. And the early morning becomes the training ground for that transformation. It's where you learn to master yourself before you try to master your goals. In those quiet hours, you start to understand something most people never learn. Discipline isn't about denying yourself comfort. It's about building a life where comfort no longer controls you. When you choose to get up early, you're not punishing yourself. You're empowering yourself. You're proving that your commitments matter more than your cravings, that your purpose matters more than your mood, and that your vision matters more than your excuses. That kind of self-mastery becomes the foundation for everything you'll eventually achieve. And here's the secret most people never realize: waking up early gives you emotional distance. It places you just far enough away from yesterday's stress, yesterday's failures, yesterday's fears, that you can finally see your life clearly. You're not rushing, you're not overwhelmed, you're not buried under demands. You have space to breathe, and in that breathing room, you discover insights you would have never seen otherwise. Solutions, ideas, reflections, realizations. The kind of clarity that feels impossible to access once the world begins demanding your attention. But perhaps the most powerful part is this: waking up early strengthens your word. When you tell yourself you'll do something, and then you actually do it, you rebuild a kind of trust that might have been broken over the years. You stop disappointing yourself. You stop negotiating with your potential. You stop believing the lie that you'll start tomorrow. Each early morning becomes a promise kept, and those promises accumulate. They form a new identity, one built on reliability, confidence, and self-respect. And soon, waking up at 4 a.m. is no longer just a habit, it becomes a symbol. A daily reminder that you are capable of choosing growth over comfort, sacrifice over excuses, and purpose over passivity. You begin to realize that if you can win the morning, you can win your life. And that is where real transformation begins. Not in the daylight, but in the darkness where you choose to rise anyway. There's a shift that happens when you start waking up at 4 a.m. consistently. A shift most people never experience because they never push themselves into the silence where real change begins. In those early hours, you realize that discipline is not built in grand gestures, but in the small choices you repeat when no one is checking on you. You begin to understand that your future is shaped not by motivation, which fades quickly, but by structure, which stays. And when you rise early, you create that structure. You create a rhythm that tells your mind and body, we are moving towards something intentionally. You stop waiting for inspiration and start taking responsibility for momentum. And the moment you do that, you step into a different level of control. You feel more grounded, more present, and more capable of steering your life with clarity instead of chaos. When you wake before sunrise, you also begin to see a pattern in your own thinking. You notice the beliefs that push you forward and the ones that hold you back. You notice the excuses you repeat out of habit, the fears you've been avoiding, and the stories you've told yourself for so long that they feel like truth. But in the quiet of the morning, those stories lose their power. You have space to question them, to challenge them, to replace them with beliefs that serve your growth instead of your doubt. This is why waking up early becomes a form of mental training. You are not just getting out of bed. You are strengthening your self-awareness. You are learning to observe your own mind rather than letting it control you. And once you gain that awareness, your life begins to change naturally. And the more you show up in those early hours, the more you begin to see the connection between your discipline and your destiny. You realize that success is not a sudden event, but a slow accumulation of decisions made in quiet moments. Each morning becomes proof that you are willing to put effort before ease, growth before comfort, and purpose before distraction. And that proof builds confidence. Over time, you start carrying that confidence into every part of your day. You speak differently, decide differently. You stop seeking permission and start creating direction. You stop waiting for motivation and start acting from intention. And in that shift, you discover the real gift of waking up early. You become the kind of person who leads their life with intention fully. Instead of waiting for life to lead them, the deeper you go to the habit of waking up at 4 a.m., the more you begin to notice something incredible. Your internal dialogue changes. The voice that once told you you're too tired, you can't do this, maybe tomorrow, starts getting quieter. It doesn't disappear, but it loses its authority. In its place, a new voice emerges, one that says, get up, you're capable, keep going. This shift is not accidental. It's the natural result of proving to yourself, day after day, that you can follow through. And once that voice grows louder, it begins influencing everything you do. You start believing in your ability to handle challenges, not because someone encouraged you, but because you've built evidence through action. You've shown yourself that discipline is possible, and once you believe that, everything else becomes possible too. Waking up early also forces you to raise your standards. When you begin each morning with discipline, the rest of your day begins to follow that structure. You don't accept the same excuses anymore. You don't tolerate the same distractions. You stop letting your emotions dictate your actions because the first decision you make every morning has already anchored you in strength, not weakness. You show up differently, more intentional, more focused, more accountable. And people around you can feel the shift even before you say a word. But one of the most powerful changes happens internally. Your relationship with discomfort transforms. Instead of avoiding hard things, you begin to seek them out because you recognize that growth always happens on the edge of your comfort zone. Waking up early becomes a daily reminder that discomfort is not something to fear, but something to embrace. It becomes proof that the life you want sits on the other side of inconvenience. And when you live with that mindset, you move through the world with a different kind of confidence, not arrogance, but alignment. You know you're doing the work. You know you're becoming someone you can rely on. And then something even more remarkable occurs. You start dreaming bigger. Not because your circumstances have changed, but because your identity has. You no longer question whether you're capable. You no longer shrink your goals to fit your comfort. Instead, you expand your courage to match your potential. That is the true gift of waking up early. It doesn't just give you more time, it gives you a new level of belief in yourself. And once you believe in yourself, the possibilities become limitless. The most profound change that comes from waking up at 4 a.m. is subtle, yet life-altering. You begin to own your life in ways you never thought possible. You realize that every choice, every action, every moment is an opportunity to show up as the person you aspire to become. The quiet hours teach you that the life you want is not handed to you. It is claimed. And claiming it requires presence, clarity, and unwavering commitment. When you rise before the world, you step into a rhythm that aligns your intentions with your actions, your purpose with your energy, and your goals with your discipline. It's in those early moments that the foundation of a remarkable life is laid, one deliberate choice at a time. By choosing to wake up when most people are still asleep, you also begin to understand the power of solitude. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the space where growth, creativity, and reflection thrive. In the absence of distraction, you confront your fears and doubts, not to dwell on them, but to overcome them. You confront your ambitions, not to question them, but to amplify them. That stillness becomes a canvas for vision. It is where you plan, prepare, and position yourself ahead of the curve. And because you've taken the time to invest in yourself first, you enter the world more focused, more resilient, and more capable than those who remain bound to the chaos of constant distraction. Waking up early also changes your relationship with success. You begin to realize that it's not about luck, timing, or talent. It's about consistency, intentionality, and self-mastery. Each morning becomes a declaration you are willing to do what others will not, to sacrifice what others cling to push through what others avoid. And that declaration accumulates over days, weeks, months, and years until it shapes the trajectory of your entire life. You start to live not as someone reacting to circumstances, but as someone creating them. You start to lead your life rather than letting it lead you. And finally, the greatest gift of waking up at 4 a.m. is this: you discover that the person you've been waiting to become, the disciplined, focused, intentional, resilient version of yourself, is not somewhere far away. They are waiting in the quiet. They are waiting in the hours before sunrise. And once you meet them, once you rise consistently to claim your mornings, you realize that your life will never be the same again. You are no longer living by default. You are living by design. You are awake, fully awake, and that is the beginning of everything.